What's up, geeks and game masters? Welcome to the Hobby Hub. Your resident GM Gabe here, and today we're going to discuss the basics of D&D. This video will include a brief description of the setting of D&D, as well as what a typical session looks like. I will also provide information on the most basic rules, which will help us understand certain words in future how to play D&D videos. Some of what I say in this video will be taken directly from the D&D 5e Player's Handbook, as it explains things the best. Now, let's equip our headbands of intellect and prepare ourselves to learn. You awaken from the ash and rubble of what was your once proud home. As you remove the cobblestone from the top of your body, you look up and see that the walls that once stood sturdy have now been reduced to mere pebbles compared to what it was before the attack. Bodies of the local militia litter the ground around you, as well as the few civilians who were unable to evacuate in time. The scent of smoke fills your nose as you see the homes of your fellow villagers have been burned to the ground. When you gather your strength to stand, the sound of a piercing screech deafens you momentarily. When you regain your senses, you look up to see, flying past the clouds of smoke that can be seen for miles, a gargantuan, reptilian winged creature which has its sights set on you. A fearsome dragon has attacked your village. Why? You don't know. At this moment, there are only two things going through your head. Do I escape while I still have the chance, or do I stand and fight? What do you do? The world of D&D can be easily compared to that of the Lord of the Rings franchise, where the setting takes heavy inspiration from the medieval era of Europe, while splashing in fantasy elements of magic, elves, dwarves, fearsome monsters, and of course, Dungeons and Dragons. The narration I gave previously was only a small example of what may occur in a typical D&D session. Whether your game master, or GM for short, decides to use a module sold by Wizards of the Coast or creates their own world for you to play in. This is usually how the play of D&D unfolds. First, your GM describes the environment that the characters in the game are surrounded by. Your GM will describe what your character is witnessing by using any of the 5 senses of perception: sight, sound, smell, taste, and feel. Once the GM has described the scene to you, it is now your job as the player to decide how you want to act. Sometimes one player speaks for the whole party, saying, "We'll take the east door," for example. Other times, different adventurers do different things. One adventurer might search a treasure chest, while a second examines an esoteric symbol engraved on a wall, and a third keeps watch for monsters. The players don't need to take turns, but the DM listens to every player and decides how to resolve those actions. Sometimes, resolving a task is easy. If an adventurer wants to walk across a room and open a door, the DM might just say that the door opens and describes what lies beyond. But the door might be locked. The floor might hide a deadly trap, or some other circumstance might make it challenging for an adventurer to complete a task. In those cases, the DM decides what happens, often relying on the roll of a die to determine the results of an action. Next, the GM will narrate the results of your character's actions. Notice how the process comes full circle, allowing the game to constantly proceed with description, action, and so on. This pattern holds whether the adventurers are cautiously exploring a ruin, talking to a devious prince, or locked in mortal combat against a mighty dragon. In certain situations, particularly combat, the action is more structured, and the players and DM take turns choosing and resolving actions. But most of the time, play is fluid and flexible, adapting to the circumstances of the adventure. Often the action of an adventure takes place in the imagination of the players and DM, relying on the DM's verbal descriptions to set the scene. Some DMs like to use music, art, or recorded sound effects to help set the mood, and many players and DMs alike adopt different voices for the various adventurers, monsters, and other characters they play in the game. Sometimes a DM might lay out a map and use tokens or miniature figures to represent each creature involved in a scene to help the players keep track of where everyone is. Now that we've discussed how the story unfolds, I'd like to explain how actions are resolved. If I say, I would like to attack the dragon, you must then roll a die to determine if what you wanted to do was a success or a failure. What kind of die do I roll, you might ask? Well, D&D uses polyhedral dice with different numbers of sides. You can find dice like these in game stores and in many bookstores. In the D&D 5e rules, the different dice are referred to by the letter D followed by the number of sides: D4, D6, D8, D10, D12, and D20. For instance, a D6 is a 6-sided die, or the typical cube that many games use. The type of die you roll will be determined by the action you are planning on taking. Percentile dice, or a D100, works a little differently. You generate a number between 1 and 100 by rolling two different 10-sided dice numbered from 0 to 9. One die, designated before you roll, gives the tens digit, and the other gives the ones digit. If you roll a 7 and a 1, for example, the number rolled is 71. 2 zeros represent 100. Some 10-sided dice are already numbered in the tens place, making it easier to distinguish the tens digit from the ones digit. In this case, the roll of a 70 and a 1 is a 71, and a double 0 and a 0 equals 100. When you need to roll a dice, the rules tell you how many dice to roll of a certain type, as well as what modifiers to add. For example, 3d8 plus 5 means you roll 3 8-sided dice and then add them together, then add 5 to the total. The same D notation appears in the expression 1d3 and 1d2. To simulate the roll of a 1d3, roll a d6 and divide the number rolled by 2, and then round the total up. To simulate the roll of a 1d2, roll any die and assign it 1 or 2 depending on whether the roll was odd or even. Now that we've explained the most common dice used in the game of D&D, I'd like to go into more detail about the most used die in D&D, the D20. There are 3 types of rolls you make when using a D20: an ability check, an attack roll, and a saving throw. An ability check is your character's ability to complete tasks that require a roll, such as picking a lock, perceiving your surroundings in a dark dungeon, or even trying to parlay with a devious prince. An attack roll is exactly what the name entails. You roll this whenever your action is to hit another creature with a weapon or a spell. If you succeed on the roll, you hit. If you fail, you don't. A saving throw, also called a save, represents an attempt to resist or avoid a spell, a trap, a poison, a disease, or a similar effect. Think of a saving throw as something that your armor can't really help you defend against. You don't normally decide to make a saving throw, you are forced to, because your monster or character is at risk of harm. Sometimes an ability check, attack roll, or a saving throw is modified by special situations called advantage and disadvantage. Advantage reflects the positive circumstances surrounding a d20 roll, while disadvantage reflects the opposite. When you have either advantage or disadvantage, you roll a second d20 when you make the roll. Use the higher of the 2 rolls if you have advantage, and use the lower roll if you have disadvantage. For example, if you have disadvantage and roll a 17 and a 5, you use the 5 and add any relevant modifiers. If you instead have advantage and roll those numbers, you use the 17 and add any relevant modifiers. Every character and monster in the game of D&D has capabilities defined by 6 ability scores. These abilities are Strength, Dexterity, Constitution, Intelligence, Wisdom, and Charisma. They typically range from 3 to 18 for most adventurers. Monsters might have scores as low as 1 or as high as 30. These ability scores and ability modifiers derived from them are the basis for almost every D20 roll that a player makes on a character or a monster's behalf. This is a table that shows what ability score provides what modifier to add to rolls for the attribute you're rolling for. If my character has a 16 strength score, they will in turn have a +3 to any die roll that requires strength, including ability checks, attack and damage rolls, and saving throws. If my character has an 8 strength, they will instead have a -1 penalty to any rolls that require strength. Anytime your character is forced to make an ability check, attack roll, or a saving throw, you must follow these simple steps. Roll the die and add a modifier, apply circumstantial bonuses and penalties, then compare the total to the target number. If the total equals or exceeds the target number, the ability check, attack roll, or saving throw is a success. Otherwise, it's a failure. The DM is usually the one who determines the target numbers and tells players whether their ability checks, attack rolls, and saving throws succeed or fail. The target number for an ability check or a saving throw is called a difficulty class, or DC for short. The target number for an attack roll is called an armor class, or AC for short. The D&D 5e Player's Handbook contains rules that govern how the game plays. That said, many racial traits, class features, spells, magic items, monster abilities, and other elements of the game break the general rules in some way, creating an exception to how the rest of the game works. Remember this: if a specific rule contradicts a general rule, the specific rule wins. Exceptions to the rules are often minor. For instance, many adventurers don't have proficiency with longbows, but every wood elf does because of a racial trait. That trait creates a minor exception in the game. Other examples of rule breaking are more conspicuous. For instance, an adventurer can't normally pass through walls, but some spells make that possible. Magic accounts for most of the major exceptions to the rules. There's one more general rule you should know at the outset. Whenever you divide a number in the game, round down if you end up with a fraction, even if the fraction is 1/2 or greater. For example, if my character has resistance to an attack, which means you halve the damage taken from that attack, and the total amount of damage dealt is 25, my character will instead take 12 damage. Guys, I really hope this video proved to be insightful for all of you level 1 adventurers out there. I'd love to continue this How to Play D&D series as well as videos for new game masters. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, please leave them in the comments section below or reach us at our Instagram. The link will be in the description box. I hope to see you all soon. Salutations, brave adventurers! Until next time, we out. Weow. Hold on, it went all the way to the top. Wait. What? Hold on. Okay, there it is. I don't even know why. I know the line for this. I don't know why the fuck I'm going back to it. Okay. What the fuck just happened? Okay, I already know the line. Whatever.